She went, oh, thanks. I don't think she was.
Hi everyone. Is it okay?
Yes.
We're starting. It's really good to see everybody. And we know that there's other people watching this online as well. So welcome to all those people online. I'm Ruth Garber. I'm Head of Social Work at Salford University. And we're here today to introduce this group of people that are going to give you a real treat in terms of telling you their stories, showing you some artwork, and showing some short film clips of other people. And I know a lot of you are social work students, so I'm sure you'll get a lot from it. So just to give you a bit of background, it's Your Life, Your Story, a small charity that aims to amplify the voices of care experienced adults and caregivers. And part of today is a book launch, isn't it? So you might have seen the desks when you came in, and there's 2 books there for sale, and they give the people's stories. There's some poetry in there, and I'm going to buy them, so I hope that some of you will buy them as well and support this charity and what they've been doing. This event fits in very well with World Social Work Day, which is why we've put it on. And the theme of World Social Work Day is co-building a new eco-social world, leaving no one behind. So we, as social workers, we don't want to leave anyone behind. We want to make sure that everybody's voice is important and that we listen to people's voices. And for those of you that the students, hearing these voices will help you when you go into practice, will help you have more understanding of what it's like to be in the care system or to be care experienced young people. So hopefully you're going to all get a lot from it. On a practical level, we're going to have a couple of breaks, one at 1:30 and one at 3 o'clock. And at 1:30 there'll be some free tea and coffee there for you. The 3 o'clock break, there's a cafe if you want to buy refreshments at that point. And then we'll finish around 4 o'clock. 4 o'clock, yeah. So do enjoy it and listen to what they have to say. Have a look at the artwork. Help yourself to tea and coffee in the break. And without any more further ado, I shall pass over to Amanda Knowles. Amanda leads a lot of the work of this charity. And when I've spoken to her, she's very passionate about what she does. And I'm sure she'll tell you a bit more about what she does and why she does it. So I think that's all from me. So welcome, and I'll pass over to you.
Thank you. Well, hello. My name is Amanda Knowles. I'm the organiser of Your Life, Your Story. I'm also the daughter of a care experienced father, and I have been a caregiver for many years. It is an honour and a privilege to be here with you at this magnificent venue in recognition of World Social Work. We're grateful for the opportunity made possible by Salford University. On behalf of the Your Life, Your Story family, I would like to thank Donna Peach for her belief in the power of relationships and the untold story, and Emma Luskin and her team for all of the generous practical and technical support we've received. It's amazing. Thank you. I joined the children's workforce in 1976, aged just 18, and I went to work in a family group home run by Oldham Social Services. I did not know at the time that the person that gave me my first job was herself a care leaver, or indeed that my own father had been in care as a young child. That was a discovery that came many years later. What I did know, though, was that my arrival in the children's workforce followed a myriad of policy changes at the beginning of the 1970s that have affected looked after children, their caregivers and families for generations. But we don't talk to each other about this, and too often it is the media that tells that story for us. The idea for Your Life, Your Story came from the literary aspirations of many care leavers who had shared these over the years with Janet Rich, founder of the Care Leavers Foundation and pioneer of Care Leavers Week. My business partner and I were supporters of the charity, and at Janet's request in 2016, I organised the National Care Leavers Conference in London, with support from Katie Lancaster, then a partner at London lawyers Farrer and Co, and Kevin Gallagher, my colleague and fellow trustee at the Consortium for Therapeutic Communities. So when Janet asked me if I would organise a writers' workshop during Care Leavers Week the following year, I didn't hesitate. I had by then already connected with my fellow director, David Jackson, during a by-chance meeting at a hotel in the Lake District, 30 years after he left Care. Not long after this, I also connected with Care Experience postgraduate researcher Rosie Canning through her online PhD fundraising page. We kept in touch, and during 2014, Rosie came as my guest to the annual Children's Conference hosted by TCTC and Wrexham Glyndŵr University. The following year, she returned as a speaker. The presentation she gave of her research into the representation of orphans and care leavers in fiction left barely a dry eye in the room. The following year, Rosie joined me at the National Care Leavers Conference I had organised, and a year later, together with published care experienced authors Paolo Hewitt and Lisa Cherry, Rosie organised and facilitated workshops at the first Your Life, Your Story event. David also came to that event to lend me his support. He was one of 16 care experienced adults spanning 4 generations who came together to learn the techniques of storytelling. But it turned out to be much more than that. Memories were shared, poems and songs were written, and tears were shed. But it was laughter that prevailed in the end as the seeds of lasting friendships were sown. It was a deeply moving experience, and as we said our goodbyes at the end of that first weekend, we knew it could not be allowed to end there. A few of us remained in regular contact, and the following year, in the spring of 2018, Your Life, Your Story was invited to Wrexham to perform at the annual Children's Conference, Why Relationships Matter. That summer was spent raising funds to host the next Your Life, Your Story event. We received a much appreciated donation from Lisa Cherry, and during Care Leavers Week 2018, we took Your Life, Your Story to Cumbria University in Lancaster. Here, we were joined by care experienced poet and playwright Louise Walwain, MBE, and writer, editor and educator Dr. Josie Pierce, published author Claire Fisher, and Una, author of Becoming Unbecoming, a memoir written in comic style. We commissioned university graduate and aspiring filmmaker Ben Milner to make a film of the event. We showcased our work to a live audience and ended the year on a massive high with the publication of the first Your Life, Your Story inspired book written by Snowball, otherwise known as David Jackson. The book tells the harrowing story of a child's journey through the care system during the 60s and 70s. It has reached an audience far beyond the care community and continues to receive great reviews. The video you're about to see is a snapshot taken from the film Ben made during Your Life, Your Story 2018. Thank you. My name's Amanda Knowles. I'm the organiser of Your Life, Your Story, a Care Leavers Week event that brings together care experienced adults with authors, artists, poets and playwrights. This video captures the event, and this is our story. The first workshop is being run by Rosie Canning. Rosie is co-founder of Greenacre Writers and Finchley Literary Festival.
Finally, he leave her alone. A week go by, he pulling on her arm again. She said, "No, I ain't gonna. Can't you see I'm already half dead?"
She's an author and doctoral researcher at Southampton University, investigating the representation of orphans and care leavers in literature. The workshop will include writing a letter and flash fiction.
Hi, I'm Una. I'm an artist and a writer. What I'm going to be doing today in my workshop is I'm going to be sort of running through some bite-sized methods of producing visual narratives. To start with, we're going to look at the way you can make a really simple character just from a few shapes on a page and sort of anthropomorphize, read into that shape different emotional content and backstories and character about how brilliant your fine motor skills are, or how much art training you've got. All comics really is a medium that everyone can use and everyone can read. We're going to spend a little bit of time making what we call thumbnails, which are just very small, very scruffy drawings, which try to work out a very simple 8-stage sequence, which can then be put into a zine, which everybody will get for homework. So hopefully everyone will go away with some idea about characters, some idea about just drawing objects, some idea about drawing ideas and concepts, and a rough sequence which they can later on turn into a visual narrative.
Claire Fisher is a novelist, creative writing teacher, and editorial consultant, and author of All the Good Things. She will talk about creating convincing characters and how she wrote about the care experience character in her novel.
My name is Josie Pearce, Dr. Josie Pearce. I have a PhD in creative writing, creative and critical writing. So I was really honoured to be on this course, to come and work on this course. I think it's such an important thing. One of the things that I want to do today, my aims, I always write aims and objectives, and my aim was to give people some tools to go away with. Tools that help people sustain their writing, all through the year, all their life, all their, getting the kids to school, going to jobs, stressful jobs, all that kind of thing. Like, give them some tools. Suggest these tools will help you keep up the momentum as you go forward, as you go from here. So I'm going to do a bit about detail, really, the things that make us want to read a book, the kind of little details about characters and places and stuff. I've been very impressed by the work that's been done before me, because people are very open now. They don't need the icebreakers and stuff of the usual sort of workshops, because they're very open. So I've adjusted things a little bit, just to step into the river with them, of creativity with them, and give them some techniques, take them a bit further.
Louise Warwin, MBE, is an award-winning poet, playwright and performer from Manchester. Her plays have been broadcast by the BBC, graced the stage of Sydney Opera House, the Royal Exchange Theatre and Contacts Manchester. Most recently, The Tide Whisperer took audiences from the cobbled streets of Tenby to the beach to hear stories about refugees and migration.
So just keep going. Whatever's in your head, dump it on the page. Been doing this 10 years now. My writing day starts with an hour's meditation, tidying up the house, doing the pages.
Her workshop will demonstrate innovative techniques to connect participants to their voices, including poems created from words taken at random from her swag bag.
You know the fridge magnet sets, the poetry set? That's where I ripped the idea off. It was necessary. So you just put in words together that you may not necessarily think of putting them together, but if you do, it gives you amazing poetry, or it gives you amazing images, and all poetry is sort of little photographs, really, images.
Is it me? It is. Do I need to be over there?
You don't need to.
Oh, good. Because that kind of looks a little bit formal, doesn't it, really? And as you can tell by the way, I've actually got a really big form. So, my name's Dave Jackson. I was raised in care from around about 6 months old to around about 16 and a half, or 17, something on that area. So today, really, I was just wanting to, I can't be talking to you in two parts really, so a little bit now about going into care, my care experience, leaving care, that whole kind of big void that perhaps are normally filled by loving parents as you start to venture out into the world, but you're actually left to do all that sort of stuff on your own and all the rest of it. A little bit like what's potentially some of you are going through with the university experience, except you can actually get on a bus and go home, whereas back in the day you were just on your own and that was it. And then I sort of wanted to lead into reconnecting with Amanda and how we sort of got together and your life, your story, etc. And then later this afternoon, I was really going to talk to you about the book and the contents of the book and kind of give you a bit more of an insight into the overall care experience, and hopefully sort of in that process you'll be in a position to potentially social work students and hopefully in the future social workers get some kind of insight into the historical context of what you're doing and why perhaps, you know, we now have a Children's Act and we have various bits of legislation and expectations and everything. And also to kind of potentially give you an idea about what to look for in a way, because one of the reasons I was involved with Your Life, Your Story, and one of the reasons I kind of got involved with the book is that I was hearing stories that were very, very similar to my story, except my story was in the 60s and 70s, and here in the 2020s we're having young people tell us the same sort of stories and the same sort of things that are going on in children's homes. And so there are clearly lessons to be learned, and some of those lessons are not being learned at the current time. So 1964, I was born. I know, I don't look it, I know, you know. So 1964, into a very abusive household basically, a mother who was a fairly dysfunctional individual, etc. And all of that culminated in a series of events which left me badly burned through being dropped into a bath of hot water, and I was thrown into a cupboard and basically left to die at the time. And I sort of got to a state of severe malnutrition and everything else. And you know when people say, like, if you hear it or you see it, then say something about it, and we kind of encourage people now to intervene, don't we, and let it be known. Well, fortunately for me, the next door neighbour was such a person, and she'd been in a position of sort of lying awake listening to this baby scream for 4 or 5 nights on the trot, and then it kind of went quiet, and she got concerned about that and raised the alarm, and then the police did what they did at the time, which was basically kick people's doors in and beat them up. And then I got taken off to hospital and survived, and the rest is kind of history. You have to listen to me now because that woman stuck her nose in, yeah, and that's just how it is. And so I ended up in children's homes in the sort of 60s, and I started off in like a kind of small family group foster home type situation, and then through a series of events I ended up going into kind of a mainstream residential care situation. And I always say, despite the fact that I'd kind of been badly scalded and starved and nearly died, it was sadly the point of going into residential care when the problems started, which gives you an idea about the sort of problems that existed in the 60s and 70s and perhaps into the 80s in residential care situations. And so these places were extremely brutal places, okay? They were places where you learned the instinct to survive very quickly and at a very young age, okay? And you learn to fight very soon. You learn to gang up very soon. You learn to do everything that was necessary in order for you to survive that situation. Because these were places where social workers, I'm not sure were they social workers then, or were they just care workers or whatever?
We were residential social workers.
Residential social workers. It kind of makes it a little bit worse, doesn't it? Because you can kind of excuse a care worker in a sort of way, you know, without demeaning care workers. But when somebody's qualified to do the job, it sort of makes it a little bit worse. And these people were brutal people. these are people who starve children, yeah, as a punishment. They literally starve you of food and drink as a punishment. And they were very brutal back in those days. You got away with beating children. You got away with taking canes to children, straps to children, to physically punching, adults punching young children, adults kicking young children, banging their heads into doors, and all these sorts of things which, when you read about in the paper now, we deem those to be people on the extreme of our society, and they're on the extreme of our standards and expectations in society. But in residential care, these people were the norm. Good people were on the extreme. Okay, so that kind of gives you an idea. Most people in this room, you will consider yourself to be good people. It kind of lends itself to the idea that people involved in social work are generally good people. But back in the day, you lot were the bad guys. You were the danger. We were being taken from homes of abuse and put with people like you who were worse than where we came from. And then social workers became your problem. And so they were like very, very brutal places to live. People didn't care generally too much about what happened to you as a child in care. Nobody cared. Nobody waved a book and said Children's Act legislation, etc., etc. You were deemed to be the bad people as a kid in care. And I read a statistic recently which it says that currently, I don't know when they started looking into it, but they're basically saying that currently the children in care at the moment, 98% of children in care are in care through no reasons of theirs. Yeah, it's not their fault. They're in care because something was done to them. 2% of children currently in care are deemed to be in care because of their behaviour. It doesn't go into why they have those behaviours, which is your job as a student is to look at that. But only 2%. And that kind of defies the general public perception of children in care, because if I'd have sort of said that and you had no idea, you'd have probably thought, no, those statistics are wrong, because these kids are bad kids. But that's how we were viewed back in the 60s and 70s. Bad kids, it didn't matter that I did nothing wrong to be there. But then what you have is, you put me into a situation where I have to fight to survive, I have to fight for food, I have to fight to stop people beating me up while I'm in my bed at night sleeping, and then you use the fact that I've done that to reinforce your misconception that I'm a bad child. And so it continues, and then that's the justification for beating the child and starving the child and all the rest of it. And so this is what was going on, okay, this is what was going on for the best part of 16 years really, and it was a constant struggle for survival. And then there's the kind of what I class as the ultimate betrayal, because you're in a situation where these people are supposed to be caring for you. You will be in that situation, or some of you will be, where it's your job to care for children. But then at 16 and a half, they just put you onto the street. No skills, can't cook, can't clean your own clothes, iron your own clothes, can't clean a house, can't clean a room, don't know how to shop, can't manage money. The sort of things that potentially some of the younger end of the student scale at university might be in, but you've got help. And we didn't have that help, we were just gone. It was just out the door. Now you probably think to yourself, well, that wouldn't happen today, but it will, because the government's just passed legislation that basically withdraws the right to care from 16-year-olds, and they put them in a fancy term now. What was it? What's the fancy term for?
Supported accommodation.
Supported accommodation, there you go. Now, the reality of supported accommodation is that they'll get you a bed sit, put you in it, and then maybe once a month somebody will call you and say, how's it going, Dave? Oh, well, yeah, it's all right. Okay, no worries. Next month then. Yeah? The phone goes down and that's what it will be. So we're still making those same mistakes. And, myself and Amanda and Sarah, we've had discussions before about you know, what that kind of means to a child when, you know, you find yourself in that situation at 16, 17 years old. You have no concept of how the world works. You have no concept of relationships. You have no concept of where you fit in society. All you know is that when somebody says something you don't like, you smack them in the mouth, and you establish yourself as the person who won't be talked to like that. When somebody hits you, you hit them back, because you have to survive. Nobody tells you that there is a different world out there, that you don't really have to do that. You know, you don't understand the difference between yourself and, let's just say, the head of department in social services, because that's a position of responsibility. But all those people who are in positions of responsibility abused us. So why would I listen to Ruth? Because Ruth is treacherous, you see. And so you had all these issues going on, and it was very, very difficult to survive. It was very difficult. I was kind of fortunate because I was one of those kids, I was quite small as a kid, so I always had to use my head a little bit to kind of navigate the stuff. You know, I got a few cheeky shots in when I could, but in the main, I had to kind of behave myself just a little bit and just get through this. But I knew these things were wrong. That was my saving grace. At 16, 16 and a half, I sort of knew these things were wrong. And so I kind of set about trying to navigate the world. I moved away from where I was living because I realised that a lot of the problems that I was going to face were in and around that area and around those people who were still in and around that area. But I had to make my way in the world on my own. I had to get myself a degree on my own. I had to work and get a degree. I had to get my master's degree on my own. And most of the things that I've done in life I've done on my own because I've developed this sense of, I don't like the word resilience because I believe that it puts the onus upon victims to do and to be, when actually we should be looking at why they became victims in the first place. Not that a victim doesn't have some responsibility. There's that old saying, you may be down, you may not be responsible for being down, but you are responsible for getting back up again. However, that doesn't take away the responsibilities of the people who put you down in the first place. And so I kind of got around and I kind of started to navigate my way through life. I'm self-employed, I'm a consultant. I work in the nuclear industry. I've travelled Europe working. I've done a lot of things, I've been to a lot of places and I've enjoyed my life in the main. And I've done a lot of the things which children from our background were never supposed to do. You weren't supposed to get a degree. You weren't supposed to get a postgraduate degree. You weren't supposed to have a job. You weren't supposed to have a happy family and raise children, because that's what you were told. You see, we were told that we would sleep on park benches. We were told that we would go to prison, that there was nothing for us. But I always kind of used to look at the situation and think to myself, who's telling you that, and why are they telling you? Well, the people who were telling me that were the people who were abusing children in children's homes. These were blokes who were raping girls in children's homes. These were men and women who were beating children to the point where they collapsed. So maybe there's not a lot of value on there. But it emphasises the point of you as social workers in that residential situation, you have a lot of power and influence over the direction that somebody's life will take. And the reason I'm saying all this to you now is because we shouldn't be in a situation where people like me in 2022 are going out into the world and having to do all that on their own without help. The point is that you need to learn from experiences of people like me to change it. And it's going to be very, very difficult for you to do that because the system is loaded against you. Okay? The system is loaded against you. So most people, for instance, Amanda Knowles there, most of us in this room would say if we saw wrong in a children's home and we saw abuse, we would say something. In 16 and a half years of being in children's homes in abusive situations, I only know one person who stood up and said something. One person. And I was in a lot of homes and a lot of people. Yeah, I've been beaten up by some of the best social workers in the country. Yeah, but there's not many. And this is the challenge that some of you will face. Yeah, some of you are going to have to make that decision one day, because you will see it, because it still exists. It's a little bit sneakier now, because every kid goes, yeah, mobile phone, record you, all the rest of it. But we're still hearing that girls are being raped, and they don't call it rape. You see, if you listen to the language, yeah, they somehow kind of sanitize it as a young woman having sex or whatever. But if they're underage, that's rape. She can't consent, it's simple. It's the same as saying no, but it's going on. And so we all have to kind of be aware of this situation and what life in care for children means, and for yourselves, the impact that you can have. You know, because things that come out of your mouth, get written on a report or whatever, can fundamentally change the direction of a child's life, for the better or for the worse. And so you have to be very, very conscious. And so, like I say, sort of life kind of moved on, and I've done all right. You know, I'm happy enough. Got a lovely son, got a granddaughter now, born in October, lovely little girl. All those good things that I'm not supposed to have because I was in care. Well, I've got them, and I'm happy about that. And that kind of led to a big meeting. I still sort of struggle with this reunion sometimes in my head, because you know those situations where they call it the perfect storm, where all the circumstances come together and something happens, and they call it the perfect storm. It's a very rare occurrence. And Amanda lives nowhere near me, and we hadn't met for over 30 years or whatever, and I was attending a wedding, part of the perfect storm. And the wedding is only about 1.5 miles from my house, in a big fancy hotel. It's a lovely place and everything. And my friend who was getting married said, I've hired the hotel, we've got loads of rooms, do you want one? And my first instinct was, nah, I only live 1 mile away, I'll just get a taxi. So I sort of said that, and he said, well no, I'll bring all your stuff up, and then you don't have to worry about taxis, you can go get changed, you can have a bit of a kip in the afternoon if you want to. And I sort of thought about it more and more. I thought, yeah, well, why not, boss? Yeah, I'll have a room. Amanda Knowles, looking on Groupon, same hotel, oh, we'll have that. Books in the hotel. So we both arrived on a Saturday, we don't know that either of us are there, and lovely summer's day, wasn't it? It was nice weather. Wedding stuff all out on the lawn, marquee, all the sides rolled up, everybody getting arsehole basically. It's pretty good, you know, it's like you do at a wedding. So we did that, and at some point I kind of stumbled off to my room, like you do, going left and right. It's only about 100 metres to the room, but I must have done at least 1.5 miles just getting there. So we did that, and then we got up in the morning. Again, I shouldn't have been at that hotel, sleeping overnight. It's just coincidence that Amanda was there. I never eat breakfast, but I was full of beer, so I thought I'll go down for breakfast because that might help, you know. And so we went for breakfast, and we were sat in the same room basically, weren't we? And I sort of saw Mike, Amanda's husband, looking, and I vaguely kind of thought, I sort of know that face, but maybe I don't, you know. And then we kind of ended up, are you, Amanda, are you Dave? Yeah. Do you remember me? And there we are. And so we kind of met, and it was like a perfect storm of different coincidences that came together. And it was a good thing. You know, we got chatting, didn't we? And I found out about the first Your Life, Your Story event, and I went to that. And we became good friends, didn't we? I think you came up to my 50th, was it?
Party, yeah.
50th birthday. I think you came. Did you come to the 25th wedding anniversary? No.
I can't remember.
Yeah, it might. I can't remember if you did now.
Definitely came to
Yeah,
your
but
birthday.
we had the 25th wedding anniversary. We had the 50th birthday party and all sorts of things. And, you know, I consider Amanda to be an integral part of my life now, you know, and we talked about the care experience many times and everything else. And, you know, in social work, you know, I would sort of say there's many competing demands that you're going to come across as a social worker. It's an extremely challenging environment. And whilst universities have their place because there's a hell of a lot that you need to know, there's a hell of a lot of value to be gained in the lived experience from both sides of the fence. And it's people like Amanda from that work side of the fence that you really need to listen to and understand. You know, Amanda's got sort of over 40 years at the coalface doing it. You know, she understands the transition from where it was to what it's become. It's not what it needs to be, but we know what it has become. And there's value in people like Sarah Jane, people like myself, who can tell you what it was from a different coalface. And it was a very brutal, harsh regime. You know, it was a violent regime. But it wasn't kid on kid, it was adult on child. And this is where you need to maybe start to understand the history, start to understand what your role is going to be, to start to think about potentially what you do to confront it, because you are going to have to confront it. People will do things in front of you, and they will say things in front of you with the expectation that as a fellow social worker, as one of us, as part of our group, yeah, you will say nothing. And if I was to ask you now, most of you will say, I will say something. But I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that 99% of you are kidding yourselves. Because you'll say something, but that's because maybe you don't understand the pressure of the mortgage yet. Maybe you don't understand the pressure of, I can say something, but then I'm going to be a social worker on the ground floor for the rest of my career. Because that's the sort of thing that happens. You get blocked, you get blacklisted, you lose your job maybe, I don't know. So there's choices to be made there, but the thing that you need to remember is there's a kid in the corner who's depending on you, and you can't afford to let him down, because that's your job, is to care for him. Yeah, your job was to care for me, but it didn't work out that way. But you guys can change the future. Yeah, and that's part of what you need to be thinking about and part of what you need to be doing. So I'm going to wrap up now because you'll be sick of hearing about me, especially when I talk about the good bit, which is all about my book, which you will be able to buy for £14.99 from your purses, wallets. We take card and cash and all sorts of different denominations. We'd even do crypto if we could, but we can't yet. So you get the opportunity later, we can have a sort of chat about that, and I don't know if some of you may or may not have read it, but we can discuss some of the contents and some of what's in there, and if you've got any questions, you know, we can kind of get into a little bit of a Q&A where you quickly ask something in 5 seconds and then I talk for 15 minutes. Okay?
Thank you, David. So now we're going to hear a life story that's narrated. Tasmin Trevorrow is another one of the directors of and trustees of Your Life, Your Story, but unfortunately can't be with us today. But this is a very powerful story, and it's a very different story to David's, but very similar themes run through it. Thank you.
My story. Part 1. The early years. My early childhood was pretty idyllic. My parents had tried to have a baby for years, unsuccessfully, and then they got me. My early years were spent pretty much in a dream world, living in a beautiful, sought-after seaside town. My parents were well off, and I didn't want for anything. I remember New Year's Eve parties with their friends who had a massive country estate with a Ferrari emblem in the tiles on the bottom of their indoor swimming pool, a helicopter launching pad in their grounds, and a bandstand in the middle of a lake. All of the kids would bunch together, running around exploring, while the adults sipped champagne and ate hors d'oeuvres. Christmas was spent in beachside holiday homes with friends sledging on sand dunes and beach walks. I never had to pick up after myself, as my mum had Betty, our home help. While mum painted in her art classes, and I played with my dog, cats and rabbit. My parents were well loved in the town, and were equally at home with their rich friends as they were with anyone who came across their path from any background. Betty once said to me, my mum was equally at home with princes and paupers, and that she hoped that I would grow up to be just like her. Mum was an avid Amnesty International member and took me to her meetings. She helped in the local community with struggling families, and the children would come and play in our garden. My parents instilled good moral values in me, and compassion and justice for the vulnerable were high on their list. Part 2, the darkness. Tragedy struck when on my 10th birthday, my lovely mum was rushed into hospital. I had known she had cancer, but they had shielded me from the reality that she was dying. This shook my world from the inside out. The next couple of days were a blur of agony and fear. On the 3rd day after she'd been admitted to hospital, my father arrived on the doorstep of their friends where I was staying, crying his eyes out. She was gone. My world was gone. My parents were old school, and again, thinking they were protecting me, didn't let me go to my mum's funeral. This made me contemplate the thought that maybe she hadn't really died, and that she'd left because I maybe was too naughty. I was a little rascal. They had also arranged for me to go to an exclusive boarding school for girls as a weekly boarder, as my dad had his own structural engineering business to run. Mum decided this while she was sick, as her best friend, the family with the Ferrari emblem on their swimming pool, was tragically killed in a horrific car accident along with her 2-year-old son. Her surviving daughter was sent to this boarding school, and it was highly recommended. I was terrified. I didn't want to leave my dad, as I thought he might die too. I had to be peeled from my dad, kicking and screaming, and if I wasn't so afraid of the dark, I would have ran across the spooky old grounds straight out of there. Instead, I was put into a dormitory of 5 other girls, laying on an iron bed with a green counterpane and told to go to sleep. The girl next to me told me to stop snivelling or the grey lady would come and get me in the night. Well, that finished me off, and I must have passed out from sheer terror and exhaustion. Life at the school was not happy. I was clearly traumatised, but none of that was recognised. Instead, they labelled me as someone who didn't pay attention in class, and was always daydreaming, staring out the window. I didn't even know I was doing it. I had night terrors all the time, a combination of grief, trauma, and the looming threat of the ghost of the grey lady. I now kept a wooden ruler in bed with me just in case she came so I could whack her with it. One night, while having a night terror, the matron came and carried me to her room and put me in bed with her. I felt suddenly relieved until her hand started going to places it never should have. I was thankful when I was moved from the dormitory opposite her bedroom and put in one much further down the corridor. The super expensive boarding school proved to be a pit full of sexual and emotional abuse, and I decided I would have to get kicked out. I became so rebellious that they put me under the mentoring and guidance of the sixth formers, who were actually busy sneaking out at night to get pissed in the fields with the local lads. They took me with them, and by age 11 my innocence was being drained away. My dad was eventually told to remove me from the school, or they would have to. Part 3, the rabbit hole. So began the string full of nannies. It didn't work. They were either too young and got caught up in the naughtiness with me, or so old that they couldn't handle me, and resigned. My dad asked for support from local services and to see if anyone could help me process what had happened to me, but because we were clean and tidy, no neglect, etc., We were not seen as a priority, so my dad resorted to letting me be a latchkey kid while he was at work, which suited my chaotic, grief-filled mind just fine. I ran wild. I got in with drug dealers by the age of 12 who were in their early 20s. My dad, hearing all sorts again, reached out for help from social services, but nothing. By then, at age 12, I was sleeping with one of these young men, being handed around by him to his friends in exchange for drink and cigarettes. I was sneaking out of my window at night. I was rebellious at school and spent half of the time outside of the door of the class, or excluded. There were 2 teachers who didn't see trouble, but saw a grieving, confused child. They were kind to me, and I never misbehaved in their classes. I am still in touch with one of those teachers today. All of our lives are littered with a smattering of kind and genuine people along the way, even if we don't realise it at the time. I became pregnant at 13 and had a miscarriage that had to have medical intervention. Still no support. I was caught in bed with one of the dealers at a drug bust when I was just 14 and had snuck out the window again. My poor dad thinking I was asleep in bed, only for his daughter to be brought home at 4 a.m. by the police and him to be told I was in this man's bed. The pain in my dad's face. I wanted the floor to swallow me alive. The police tried to extract evidence from me about me being underage, and they wanted to arrest him for this, but I had already been given the script and told what to say if the police asked any personal questions. I had just slept in the bed, nothing had happened, and I had got pregnant from some holiday maker I met while drinking at the beach shelter. My poor dad had to sit through this interview, and it broke him. I lost my lid with the police, kicked the chair over and ran out. I was pursued by a female officer who, when she got hold of me, promptly slapped me straight around the face and told me to sort myself out. I fell silent from then on and would answer no more questions. A few days later, I got taken into care, ripped away from my dad who loved me and had tried every which way to get help to support me for 4 years and was ignored. I was dragged into a foster carer's home, kicking and screaming, with police intervention. My anxiety, that was already fueling a lot of my thoughts that my dad would die if I wasn't there, was now at fever pitch. My social worker was cold and uninterested and took great pleasure in chatting with my foster parents within my earshot, saying that they really thought my sexual promiscuity must be linked to my dad and that there must have been sexual abuse there. I hated her, and her stupid theory couldn't have been any further from the truth. I was quizzed on it often, which always resulted in me telling her exactly what I thought of her. They took me to a psychologist, but she spent most of the introduction time flirting with him, so I just would not engage. Meanwhile, the real sexual exploitation continued. The home I was taken to was very strict. The foster dad was ex-army major, was a dictator to his wife and kids, and expected me to follow suit. He went to London during the week and came home at weekends, which I was grateful for. My room was in the attic, and they also had a grandma with dementia living in their house. I had to walk past her bedroom to get to mine. She would freak me out by appearing in the middle of the night when I went to the loo. I found solace in C.S. Lewis's books about Narnia. I found a strange peace in reading those books that I had never experienced before. I would disappear to my room with a hot chocolate and a cheese and cucumber sandwich on granary bread that my foster mum would make me, and suddenly all the anxiety would drain away once I had gone through the wardrobe with Aslan. Strangely, to this day, when things are highly stressful, I still crave those sandwiches and a hot chocolate. Still, I was desperate to be home with my dad. My worst day came when the Major was back. He was particularly controlling that weekend. We were always made to stand behind the dining room chairs until he gave us permission to sit down. He had made the lunch. As I was eating the salad, I found a baby slug in the leaves and wanted to vomit. I put my cutlery down and said I'd finished. He told me that I had to eat the whole lot, slug included. I told him to get lost. He sent everyone out of the dining room and sat opposite me, saying I would not leave the table until I had eaten the whole lot, so I just sat and stared at him. He would not let me leave to go to the toilet, and I was bursting. He was getting very angry at my defiance and told me that my dad should have drowned me at birth. I needed to get out of there, so in desperation I took my nail bite solution that was in my pocket and downed it, saying it was nail varnish remover and that he would be responsible for my death. He panicked and left the room to get his wife. I took this opportunity to peg it out of the door and run away. I hid out at a friend's farm in their barn for a couple of nights. My friend told me that my dad was going out of his mind with worry, so I went to the house in bits, begging him to not let them take me away again. I was 15 by then, and just one big bag of grief, stress, anxiety and confusion. After finding out what I had gone through at the foster carers, I was allowed to remain at my dad's with support from social services. Finally, it was just all too late. One morning, shortly after I was back home, it was October, and there had been a massive storm and the phone line was not working. My dad woke me up and asked me to please go to the phone box, a 10-minute walk away, and call for an ambulance. Hypervigilance through the roof, I ran and called. The ambulance came. My dad told me he loved me and he would see me later, and was gone. I had nowhere to go but school, so I went. I walked in late, got screamed at and broke down. The headmaster called me in and said nonchalantly I should prepare myself because my father might die. I was taken to the hospital where he was on life support, having had a massive heart attack. I told him I loved him, and if he could go and be with my mum, I didn't want him to just stay for me. I wanted him to have peace. Soon after this, the beeping machine started to flatline. I was grabbed by a nurse, screaming and crying. They put me out of the room. I was sat in a side room with a nurse when the doctors came in to tell me that he was gone. It was pouring with rain when I went into that hospital, but as I came out, the sun was shining brightly, and I knew he was okay. Part 4, the continued chaos. I was sent off to relatives in South Africa with a green ribbon in my hair so they could identify me at the airport. Unbeknownst to my family, who were expecting this wonderful young lady to arrive, I had started chatting to the people next to me on the plane, a businessman called Mike and a recent divorcee called Linda. After hearing my plight, they let me share their whiskey and we laughed and cried all the way. Mike bought me a bottle of opium perfume, as he was so upset that I was an orphan and had to be recognised by a green ribbon, that he told me whenever I felt shit to spray that perfume and know that things would get better. All our lives are littered with a smattering of kind and memorable people, even if we don't realise it at the time. It still takes me back now, that smell. The look on my relatives' faces when the green ribboned girl with a serious hangover came through the airport to meet them was mixed. Some were just overwhelmed with emotion, others looked slightly intimidated. The next few months were spent bouncing around from relative to relative, as one after the other realised I would not be going to a private school to finish my education in a boater and check dress. I had a mostly positive time there, as far as I was concerned, but I missed my friends. It was decided that I would be sent back to the UK, to the care of social services. I was made a ward of court. My friend's mum wanted to foster me. She had been like a mother figure in lots of ways, but because she was divorced, I was not allowed to go there. She has remained loyal and loving towards me to this day, another light in my darkness. I had to make my own way aged 15 from Heathrow to Cornwall, combination of trains and buses. I didn't really care. My suntan was better than anyone else's, and that's all I allowed myself to be bothered with, that I would go back and be the envy of all my mates. I was picked up from Penzance Station by my social worker and taken to Helston, where I was deposited into another military foster care placement. They were not as rigid, but money was definitely the motive. I was told to leave the house at 8:30 in the morning, and I was not allowed back until 5 in the evening. It wasn't long until I fell into the wrong crowd. The lads from the local children's home soon groomed me again, and I was passed around for packets of fags and bottles of Merrydown. I was hitchhiking all over and coming back at night. My foster dad seemed to purposefully forget to do up his dressing gown to conceal his naked body when coming down the stairs to open the front door. I decided I needed to get out of there. I was then placed in the local children's home for a few months and the exploitation continued. I spent most of the time there stoned or drunk. I was eventually placed into another placement where things were slightly better. I loved the children in this family like they were my own siblings. I babysat frequently and felt accepted. But my foster mother was not happy in her marriage, and after 6 months of me being there, she began resenting my freedom. She started taking it out on me. If I went out too much, I treated the place like a hotel, and if I stayed at home, I wasn't acting like a normal kid. One night, she was particularly drunk, and she told me I better harden up in life and realise blood is thicker than water, and I would never really belong anywhere. I was devastated and said I just wanted to be treated like I was part of her family. She said, "What do you want me to do? Sit you down and fucking breastfeed you?" I ran out of the house and decided that since I would never belong, I might as well end it. So I downed a load of paracetamol, was in hospital for 3 weeks, stomach pumped, meds, liver damage. When I eventually got picked up by my foster mum and her friend, she told me she had told the kids that I was in hospital with a really bad headache. I mean, you must have been to take that many paracetamol. Her and her friend burst out laughing. On my 18th birthday, when the money stopped, I woke up to find my bags packed. Sofa surfing, life, and more sexual abuse resumed. Part 4. There is light. While I was 18, I received an invitation of a free flight to South Africa to go and attend the celebration of my great aunt's 80th birthday. Her daughter was organising it. Life was crazy. I was living on people's floors, going from friend to friend, struggling to find work, so I thought, bugger it, I'm going. I decided to try and make a go of it in South Africa. It was a world away from sofa surfing, living at my aunt's with a swimming pool and tennis court. Even though my material circumstances had changed, I was still chaotic inside, and I got in with the local surfers and started smoking weed again. In between all of the parties, I actually met a lovely, stable girl who used to come and swim at my aunt's and go for walks. I didn't want any of them to know about my past, so I avoided the topic. My aunt, who was a mixed bag, organised for me to go and volunteer at an orphanage for abused and abandoned children. As soon as I started volunteering at the orphanage, my world changed. My big rock on my shoulder became a tiny chip, and I stopped thinking about my own disadvantage and just loved loving the children at Nazareth House. It was family. I ran in the sports day, in the parents' races for them. I read them stories at night, cleaned their knees when they fell over, and cuddled them when they were sad. There was no red tape, just love and care. Things with my aunt were strained. She was not an easy one at the time, and she was a racist, and I often challenged her on this. One Friday she told me she wished that I had died and not my mother, and told me she was sending me back to England. I said that I would not go, so she packed my clothes in a bag and dropped me off at the orphanage. Irony. The sister that ran the ward I worked on took me to the Mother Superior. I was not raised a Catholic, by the way. She asked everyone apart from the sister I worked with to leave her office and then said, "We will give you a room on the top floor, but you will have to sneak up there as I'm not really allowed to do this, and some of those old cronies out there will report it. We will not abandon you, and you can stay here and be fed and loved for as long as you need to. Our lives are littered with a smattering of kind and genuine people, even if we don't realise it at the time." I loved my time at Nazareth House. I did training courses and started working with the babies who had HIV. I started going to church with a girl I swam with and moved into a flat share with some girls from this church. For the first time since my mum had died, I felt peace and a sense of belonging. I started to heal. I will forever cherish those years in South Africa, loving, living and healing. I am in touch with a lot of the children who are now adults from the orphanage, all of whom consider their time there full of love and happiness. Part 5. Moving on. I ended up having to return to England to settle my parents' estate, which had been held in trust until I was 21. Trustees had not taken care of my family home, and it had been rented out, abused, trashed, left empty. Many of my parents' antiques and paintings had been stolen. With the help of some friends, I cleaned it up and moved back into my family home. Life has been a mixed bag for me since then. I have worked in services for people for many years, from project work in hostels for young people to working in social services. My experience of the contrast of the lives of the young people in care in South Africa to the young people in the care of the UK services is huge. Ironically, the kids from South Africa that I know have had a far more positive experience, even though materially they had far less. This is what one of the young men who I cared for said. RE the childcare in South Africa compared to the UK. It almost feels like the kids here are just a number. I remember there were various people like yourself, Taz, that just wanted to take the time to make the difference in a young child's life. I feel from what I've seen here, a lot of people do it for the wrong reasons. This young man is now a director for a well-known company in the UK. As much as I agree with what he's said, I also feel, having worked in the system here, that those that want to make a difference in a young person's life are so bound up in red tape that they are suffocated from being able to make the real difference that they set out to. They burn out and eventually walk away from the position, as it doesn't allow you to really make the difference you wanted to. I eventually walked away when, having been diagnosed with multiple health issues, I had to prioritise myself and my family, my 4 lovely daughters and my husband. I would say that I survived the care system as a child in care and as a caregiver. How sad that even has to be a thing. I hope from me sharing this condensed and redacted part of my story that you will take away something from it that will help you. The 2 main points for me are this: do not label the care child or tar them with the same brush. We come from all walks of life and for a variety of reasons, and it is rarely because of the child that we end up in care. We need love, support, understanding, and to know those that care for us truly give a shit and that it is not just a job. Also, reactive social work rarely succeeds. Early intervention and support to keep the family together, providing counselling, life skills where necessary, and consistency and genuine care. Thank you for listening.
It's a break now, isn't it? Yeah. Thank you. We're going to go into a break now. I think we all need a cup of tea after that, don't we? And then we're coming back at 5 to 2. Yeah. Okay. To hear some more care experienced people talking about their Your Life, Your Story experiences. So, thank you. Hope to see you back here at 5 to 2. Thank you.
No.
Is it not?
No, it's Mal.
Oh, yeah, it's Mel. Mel's is quite
Okay.
good.
Okay, thank you. Hope you all enjoyed your cup of tea or coffee. We're going to carry on with, we're going to hear a testimonial from one of the care experienced adults that came to Your Life, Your Story. And then we're going on to hear from Sarah Jane. So with that in mind, over we go to
Mal.
Mel.
Hello. Back in 2018, I attended the first Your Life, Your Story event as an adult care leaver, as we used to be known. I think the term that everybody's more comfortable using these days is care experienced, and I am a care experienced adult. My name's Mel Fraser. I'm going to be a ripe old 52 this year, 2022, and throughout my adult life, you know, I always walked around with that sort of feeling that all of us care experienced people can relate to, that feeling of actually I'm not the same as all my friends and colleagues and peers. I don't have that, you know, those of them who have that conventional sort of family upbringing and that you know, background. I always felt, yeah, that's just something quite alien to me, because my background was pretty complex, having gone into care at the age of, well, when I was a baby for a period of time, and then when I was a very young adolescent, so at about 11, and then I left local authority care when I turned 16, actually on my 16th birthday. I left residential care and got a bedsit in Peckham. So that history, and I've just sort of glossed over that, a lot of it, that history kind of sets you aside, sets you apart from everybody in the workplace. You know, if I went to university, I took myself to university in my late 20s, and there were no care experienced people who were studying at university on the same degree programme that I was on. So again, you know, I was reminded of the difference that I felt, you know, having had that care experience and having come through local authority care in the way that I did back in the 70s and 80s. So going to the Your Life, Your Story event back in 2018 was just mind-blowing. You know, it provided, not only did it provide some amazing, you know, advice and workshops and skills, you know, learning opportunities to learn skills when it comes to writing creatively and writing potentially our, you know, my life story, our life stories as care experienced adults. It provides a space where those of us who've reached adulthood and come through the care system, it provides a space where we can connect, and actually just that it's so powerful being in the room with other adults, you know, who've experienced those very similar feelings of being in either residential care or being fostered or adopted. You know, I don't think you can put a value on you know, how enriching and how important it is for adults who've experienced the care system in England to come together and actually, you know, just, you know, have that knowing. You may not even have to, you know, you don't have to even divulge all your experiences. It's not about, you know, necessarily divulging all of the experiences that you've gone through in the same room with everybody, but being in that room and spending that time with care experienced adults as a care experienced adult just provided me with, you know, a real sense of family. Family and just being in a room with people who got it and who get it is just so precious. And you know, there are the connections that I made in 2018 are connections that, you know, some of those connections are, you know, those people are going to be in my life forever now. They feel like family. You know, some of those people feel like family, and you know, I just can't really put into words how wonderful Your Life, Your Story is as an event for us adult care experienced people, and you know, all the family connection stuff aside, you know, the people that come along and offer their time and their expertise in terms of teaching you how, or giving you skills and how to put together, you know, words creatively that might actually help you unlock some of the difficult stuff in your past, but also just, you know, unlocking your creativity. Just, you know, the exercises of, you know, sharing, you know, doing drawings and creating poetry, and, you know, and doing that in that group of people, with that group of people, is just so powerful. And those experiences, that experience is going to stay with me forever. And those skills, hopefully, when the day job allows, you know, I'll continue with my creative writing. I've written so much since I attended that event, and I attended again in 2019, and again, you know, just you know, built on those bonds that were already built in 2018 that I'd made, and you know, just I am just so very, very grateful that something like Your Life, Your Story exists for those of us who've been through the care system. And you know, after the pandemic and after everything we've all been through, I can't wait to hear that Your Life, Your Story is back on, and you know, people are going to be coming from all over the country and attending, and you know, and offering that opportunity again for us care experienced adults to connect and get creative all together in the same room and over a few days. And so I just, you know, Amanda is an angel. She's the founder, one of the founders of Your Life, Your Story, and you know, she's an angel. And I just can't sing her praises or Your Life, Your Story's praises enough.
Sorry, Jane.
I'm going to read from here if it's
I'm
all
going
right.
to do it.
Excuse me. So, good afternoon, everyone. And first, I would like to acknowledge how incredibly poignant it is that we're here during World Social Work celebrations, and today, St Patrick's Day, my fake of birth, the 17th of the 3rd, and a day which has been designated to National Social Care Day of Remembrance and Reflection, to create a space for all of us to reflect on the extraordinary contributions of social care sector throughout the pandemic, and also to remember those who we've lost. And for our whole Your Life, Your Story family, it's a day where we remember and celebrate one of our own. So my name's Sarah Jane Jones, and alongside Amanda and Dave, I'm one of the team of directors at Your Life, Your Story. I'm care experienced, having lived in kinship care, foster care, and supported accommodation, although it weren't very supportive, to be quite honest. I'm also an artist, poet, consultant, trainer, qualified social worker, and co-founder of a small community interest company called Artefacts, whose seeds were sown and nurtured through connection with Your Life, Your Story. And I personally became connected with Your Life, Your Story after incredibly difficult time with my mental health. And through conversations with my soul sibling, Yusuf Paul McCormack, whom the anthology The Gift of Experience, The Truth Unwrapped is dedicated to, and who devastatingly was taken from us by COVID-19 in January 21. And Yusuf's artwork is with us today. This is little Paul, and that's a representation of Yusuf as a child, and all the labels you see on the jacket there are names that Yusuf was called when he lived in the Catholic institution that brought him up. So I would urge you to have a look at the artwork and things like that. So I originally met Yusuf through his inaugural art exhibition, No Colours for My Coat, which the piece here that you see up the front is from that exhibition. On our former stomping ground, a comfortably curious place called Charmsley Wood. And after many conversations, it was Yusuf who actually convinced me to attend Your Life, Your Story in October 2018 during Care Leavers Week, which I find slightly ironic because as a care experienced person, I'd always avoided everything to do with Care Leavers Week, social workers, care leavers, because care had left me long before I exited the system. So even the phrase leaving care is paradoxical because, you know, we don't leave care. Care leaves us. Care don't leave people, do you know? Well, it's not supposed to anyway. So celebrating that fact always seemed really exceptionally odd to me. And I'd wrangled with these reflections and shared them with Yusuf, who shared his experience of the residential event from the previous year. That it wasn't another dose of tokenistic virtue signaling like we normally get in Care Leavers Week, everyone's scrambling to do their bit. And the person who organised the event, Amanda, was all right, which is high praise indeed from a care experienced adult about a social worker, especially one who used to use social workers for target practice. So I must have been suitably convinced because I attended my first Your Life, Your Story in October 2018. However, if someone had said to me then, as I'd stood with my poem clutched in my trembling grip, that I'd be here today talking to yous, I'd have laughed my arse off. Yet here I am, talking. And the only way I managed to get through that in 2018, reading my first poem, was for a chair to hold me up, so I weren't completely poleaxed by anxiety. And fast forward 12 months to Your Life, Your Story 2019, and myself and Yusuf, as our newly developed artefacts, delivered our first creative workshop, taking back our narrative. And from this workshop, the phoenix that you see at the front, that was developed from part of the workshop was we had labels, and everyone was given labels to write some of the negative things that they'd been called in their lives, and the positive things, and the positive labels we put on a positivatory and used them as the leaves, and the negative labels we put through a shredder, and I took all the shreddings home with me and I made the phoenix, and that phoenix was later developed into the logo from Your Life, Your Story, as it rises from the shreds of the past. And through Your Life, Your Story, I've had the privilege of connecting with many incredible individuals, both care experienced and caregivers, and those who straddle both sides of the fence, like myself. As this is one of the unique features of Your Life, Your Story, the recognition that it is a shared journey, and that as we're experiencing care and the system with all its complexities, difficulties, disappointments, breakdowns and breakthroughs, so are the caregivers on the other side. And that's something I had very little, if any, appreciation for as a young person in care. However, I now recognise that there's far more that unites us than divides us. And Your Life, Your Story facilitated a safe space, a creative space where I was able to connect not only with myself, but with other people through creativity and the shared threads of our existence. And I was able to connect with the complexities of my own story, my truth, and explore this at my own pace through the creative arts. And in consideration of world social work and the theme co-building a new eco-social world, leaving no one behind, we've got not just the opportunity but a responsibility as humans to engage with our networks and our communities and those people that we work alongside to make contributions to the values and principles which enable us all to have a dignified life, you know, that we have dignity and it's respected through those shared futures. And at Your Life, Your Story, we're invested in supporting individuals through acknowledging both our individual truths and our shared past and the threads of connectivity so that we can develop greater insights and move forward to stronger shared futures. That's all from me for the moment. And now we're going to have a video from another one of our Your Life, Your Story members, Jackie.
Your life, your story. I was very scared attending my first event. I felt very insecure. My English language is not so good and my grammar, well, let's just leave it there. I left school at the age of 16 with 7 CSEs behind me. But with Your Life, Your Story team behind me and now my family, they showed me love and care. They gave me a safe place to grow from a child whose voice was unheard and not valued with my simple words and poems, to now being able to talk and express myself, putting pen to paper, saying more words, improving my language, because I've been supported and nurtured. Your Life, Your Story understood my locked-in voice, and over the last 3 years have helped me learn that my voice does matter, my story matters, and most of all, that I matter. I'm no longer a former irrelevant child. I'm now actually a relevant adult. Thank you, Your Life, Your Story.
It's back to me. So the piece I'm going to read to you, it's called The Art of Falling Apart and Fusing Back Together.
Your Life, Your Story.
That's Dave. Yeah, he weren't in there, I'm sure he weren't. So yeah, The Art of Falling Apart and Fusing Back Together, and really it's about how creativity has kind of been a real positive influence in my journey. So at the beginning, creativity and in particular the arts had never really been a central feature of my early existence, externally at least. Sure, I'd taken part in the obligatory gluing and sticking throughout school and been perturbed when I had to share my pots of gloopy poster paints, that sharing always meant we'd quickly descend into some unidentifiable shade of sludge. The creative arts in the most formal sense was something that was most definitely placed out of reach for us council estate kids, not least because everything has a cost, and well, we were poor and we knew it. But internally I had a love of words, and I'd spend hours making up stories and songs and verse in my mind, creating imagery to accompany them, or any music that I heard. I enjoyed analysing buildings, architecture, and finding faces and images in the clouds or in inanimate objects. I always say I'm that person who could find Tina Turner in a piece of toast. However, the closest we came to art materials outside of school was our annual colouring book and crayons, which I'd treasure until one of my aunties coloured in the best picture or my brother scribbled on a page, and then commenced meltdown, and my internal rejection of imperfection would mean I'd sacrifice my whole colouring book. But now I'd just make that scroll into another image and crack on. But as a child living in chaos, I needed to be able to maintain my control in whatever way I could. In the world that I came from, you wasn't allowed to express yourself outside of the defined parameters of others. And if you did, you'd be spotlighted, taunted, mocked, teased, ridiculed, and your sense of creative expression, your sense of self eroded, until eventually you disconnect and internalise the messages that the creative arts weren't really for me. I was too clumsy and heavy-footed and too scruffy and spatially unaware to be a dancer. I was an elephant ballerina. I was too sporadic and erratic and unfocused to be a musician, and too intellectually inept and uneducated to be a writer or painter. I was too much of everything that wasn't right or proper or correct. And despite me actually enjoying being creative, the arts, I was led to believe, weren't for me. In comprehensive school, as my life became far more chaotic with my entrance into the care system and an apathetic social worker and the revolving door between home and kinship care and foster care, I'd appreciate the escapism afforded by the ability to engage in creative activities, making whatever developed in my mind a fugitive from my reality, assisted through the relative freedom of things like textiles classes and photography, and being able to go into the craft workshop where we'd create with clay and metal and glass and wood. However, writing and art were subjects that held conflict for me, because for me they were not only about exploring the content, which in art was quite prescribed and formal and dull at school, but also connecting with my emotions and vulnerability and expression of one's inner world and thoughts and feelings. And with what was happening in my reality, that felt like a very unsafe place for me to be, and something that I wasn't really equipped or ready to open the door to, because protecting myself at that time was my only driver. So my solution to this intrusion on my internal vulnerabilities was to be disruptive, to demonstrate my creativity in an entirely different and very unproductive way, which resulted in my ejection from the classroom quite frequently, and the distance that had placed me back inside my window of tolerance, which is firmly where I stayed. However, on my little jaunts out of school, what they referred to as truanting, myself and my friends would visit Birmingham Museum and Art Gallery because it was free, and it was warmer than sitting in a stairwell or a bus stop, and it was decidedly less toxic than the bin chutes, and somewhere where most people wouldn't really bother with you because they'd just assume you were on a school excursion. So my first real look at artworks, the subject matter reflective of the internalised view that I had of art, that it was only really for the wealthy. Otherwise there'd be vast oil paintings of our council estates and sculptures and pictures of people we could relate to, people like us, people like me. The school environment had been a constant for me. The creative opportunities it offered were a significant means of escape from my pain and the inner turmoil I was experiencing, an outlet for my frustration and anger, and a distraction from the realities of a chaotic and abusive environment, which is where I began, and now the turbulent and uncertain journey on which I found myself. So unsurprisingly, when this hard-to-place, feral, hard-to-reach individual, or should I say child, fell off the radar and into oblivion, there weren't no rescue mission, there wasn't a search party, there was no lighthouse to guide the way back. So age 15, I became lost in my experience, thrust into isolation and abandoned by the state in supported accommodation. Commenced addiction, exploitation, and a spiral into self-abandonment and emotional destruction. Lost in terror, turmoil and trauma, feeling fragmented, distorted, depleted and inherently defective. But I had in moments of lucid comportment written the odd pages in my journal and scrawled the beginnings of a poem or a vague yet insidious image. But these moments were fleeting and often overshadowed by the crushing ebb and flow of distress and despair and psychological disarray. I'd been consumed by the chaos and lost the self that I once was, and no longer had the wherewithal to hold space for where creativity could exist. And my creativity, along with many other aspects of my identity, my thoughts, my feelings, my emotions, had to be filed away and pushed into a tiny box in my brain, transported into a giant void, to a place of nothingness, somewhere where everything that once mattered now exists. And there it stayed for a very long time, until one day I couldn't keep the catch shut anymore and I couldn't keep it in. The end of beginnings and new beginnings for things. So they say art's good for the soul, and my existence so far and the trauma I'd incurred from this made me feel for a very, very long time that I didn't have a soul, or at least there was a huge void within me, portions unaccounted for, fragments missing, that there were pieces of my picture that were absent and I would never understand or be able to find because I didn't know what they looked like in the first place. Also, that for me to be open to exploring my creativity, I'd have to be vulnerable and connect with myself at the very least. And as a care experienced person, I was hardwired to mask my vulnerabilities and protect myself because connection felt very unsafe. The messages I'd internalised told me that I shouldn't enjoy things, that I wasn't good enough, I was useless, and that the things I created were ridiculous and that they needed to be perfect and I was unable to be perfect, and that again I'd be rejected. And this had created many barriers to me exploring and embracing my creativity. Up until that point I'd not seen my creativity as a resource or something that I could draw upon in difficult times, something to use to help me along my journey and support me through my mental anguish and pain. But creativity, however, began to help me gently discover that I do have a soul and that I am more than the sum of my parts. Rediscovering my creativity was freeing. It was like being gifted a pair of spectacles with a multitude of unique lenses with which I had the ability to explore my own experience, not only being able to travel into the past and explore all of the difficult stuff, but exploring the now and being able to visit the future. And also reimagining both my internal and external worlds completely, transporting myself off into far-flung dimensions through fantasy and reality, through themes, textures, representations, projections of insights, and infinite imagination. Often once we've left little school, there's a lack of emphasis on the opportunity for free creative expression. The opportunities and the benefits of having creative experiences become limited. And as little people, we have a blast being creative. We're masters of the moment, and we don't usually develop such well-established internalised narratives which are shame-inducing and make us really self-conscious about what we're doing, or focus solely on the end product as opposed to enjoying the creative process. And as a care experienced person, our experience has often severely impacted not only our sense of self and where we fit in the world, but also our opportunities and the access to a range of positive experiences. And if we're not aware of the options and the choices and opportunities that are open to us in the world, we'll need support to locate them. Until someone shows us where the door is, we won't even be aware that there is a door, let alone be able to access what might be on the other side. And sometimes it's more than simply pointing to it and telling people it's a door. It's about supporting us to use the handle or key. And it can be a difficult thing if we're not used to it, to unleash our creative freedom and to create without being confined to boundaries or rules, just to be in the moment and express ourselves. Creative artistic expression in whatever form it comes can bring so many benefits to individuals of all ages, and it can be particularly beneficial to those like myself who have experienced adversity and trauma and difficult and challenging experiences that may have impacted both physically and emotionally, hence being especially valuable to those who are care experienced. The practice of creating and making stuff, of making art, supported me to slowly reconnect with myself when for so long everything had been disconnected, separated, compartmentalised into endless little boxes within my brain, versions of lost people encapsulated in jars within a fortress in my mind, sequences of images that had been lost in translation between past and present. I now had access to all these failed and forlorn, abandoned edges of my being. Creating captured focus and helped me to calm the chaos, as concentrating helped me to slow everything down, slow my brain down, slow my breathing down, which has been really helpful in wrangling with anxiety. It brings a sense that what we've expressed is now in some way a little bit more contained, as I've put it somewhere other than inside my mind, where I'm able to ruminate and overthink about it. And it's almost like it becomes less uncertain, more concrete. The lines and the edges aren't so blurred, and the issue's got some borders and boundaries because I've been able to capture it in time and space. And creativity has given me space to explore the many facets and complexities of my identity, developing a greater sense of myself, who I am and where I fit. And more importantly, that I don't have to fit, and that I can be unapologetically me without self-censoring or editing parts out or feeling like I've got to be a more acceptable, sanitised version of myself. Creativity supported me to learn about myself, to gain insight and understanding into what makes me tick. And it's also begun to help me develop trust and respect in my inner self, which in turn enables me to better express myself in the external world, helping me to take some of the steam out of the pressure cooker. Having a creative outlet has been key to helping me self-regulate, to relieve stress, to calm intrusive thoughts, and to create room in my busy mind, or something to do for my busy hands. Creativity's helped me process events by exploring difficult and painful thoughts, experiences and emotions, but much deeper from a distance, at arm's length, from the end of a pen or a pencil or a paintbrush or a camera lens. And making and creating and developing art can help all of us to harness both our internal and external resources, building upon ways to help us cope with our frustrations and disappointments, to overcome problems, to be solution focused and find ways around obstacles and barriers that we're facing. And it encourages us not to give up, to keep trying, to keep exploring different methods, to have curiosity and keep asking questions. Creativity has improved my self-determination just by way of creating and wanting to get my creation to match the vision that's in my mind, to convey messages that I want to convey, to evoke emotions and feelings. I've had to be determined to connect with those feelings and negotiate with them myself to be able to convey them. And this has helped me to develop a greater sense of emotional literacy, having a deeper insight and understanding into my own feelings and exactly what they are, and being able to identify and name them. As a child who was care experienced, I couldn't tell you what my feelings were. I just used to say things like, I feel fizzy, I feel spiky, I feel spinny. And it's only now that I can kind of, put that to what the emotion is beneath it. And harnessing our creativity helps us with decision making, dealing with uncertainty and the unknown, pushing the boundaries and breaking the rules in a safe way. It helps us to discover skills of reflection and analysis. It can support us with our observation skills and through interested inquiry. It can help us to deal with loss, as sometimes no matter how hard we try, it don't work out. And the process of creating is restorative, enabling us to explore deep and often hidden thoughts and feelings that have been locked away within our being. Through creativity, we can approach and confront and begin to analyse even the most painful of experiences, as they don't need to be faced head on. We can approach things from a much safer distance through our use of symbolism, colour, texture, representation and metaphor to project our inner worlds, conversations and conflicts. And there are many metaphorical messages that translate through art into life. And using metaphor in my artwork is important to me because it helps me to confront an issue and come up with my own solutions. Helps me to remain within my window of tolerance, as it maintains that safe distance between the facts of the story and the emotions on the surface. And it's a way of supporting me to contain big, powerful and scary thoughts, to protect me from getting stuck within the difficult emotion and past trauma, helping me to focus on the here and now. And using metaphor involves me connecting with my story in a different way, translating my thoughts and feelings into imagery, and conveying whole stories without having to give name to them directly, confronting specific issues from a side angle so they creep up on the viewer instead of hitting them head on. And the creative arts our emotion, the conceptualisation of our unique thoughts, feelings and perspectives, they allow us to explore without judgment, And it can be the light that illuminates the darkness to guide the way. It can be the spotlight that shines into the deepest, darkest corners of existence that people would rather turn their head away from and ignore. The creative arts can be a whisper, or there can be a wail. There can be a fit of rage or a flood of tears, the sense of joy or the translation of fears, the silenced voice of the abused child, or the insight into our inner turmoil. Creativity helps us to communicate beyond words. As often, our trauma parts can be inaccessible through verbal communication. However, our trauma can be communicated through imagery and creative expression. And we can give words to our silence, a voice to our inners, those who never had the words, who never had the space or opportunity to speak them. The inners that are scared, that were ignored and silenced. It can give voice to and amplify all of those words trapped inside, the words of little me that was unable to speak. Embodied storytelling and using narratives, be that through words or images, to tell stories, analyse and create can not only be incredibly freeing and evolutionary for us, the creators, it can also lead to a greater insight and understanding for the viewer, and it supports us with developing our social skills, as through the creations we can connect with others who can relate to the shared threads of experience. And this can help us to nurture community and restorative relationships, building our skills such as collaboration, negotiation and co-production, having a sense of achievement, a sense of fun and a feeling of interconnectivity, feeling like we're part of something bigger than ourselves. Rediscovering my creativity has made space in my mind to enable me to exist in a place other than trauma. And my belief is that the arts and creativity are beneficial to everyone, and that everyone's creative in their own way, and the possibilities and opportunities are endless, as creativity is unique to the individual. The arts are a fundamental aspect of our existence that enable us to explore our internal and external worlds and facilitate deeper conversations with ourselves and others, and allow for freedom of personal expression. And the arts bring people together socially and have historically depicted how we have lived our cultures, traditions, customs and beliefs. And as part of the wider care experience community, care experienced artists are able to offer insight into our experiences, journeys and shared threads of lived experience and perspectives. And the arts are a great way for us to connect with ourselves and others, explore, communicate, build self-awareness and confidence and assertiveness, and to develop our own unique individual creativity. And when we understand that for meaningful creative expression we don't have to be a super talented artist in our chosen craft who creates these masterpieces. Art and creative expression is about freedom. It's about exploring, discovering, unlocking, experimenting, letting skills develop naturally through self-discovery and creative curiosity. And to get the most out of creativity, we must be allowed the freedom to explore and develop at our own pace, not within the confines or parameters of others and their perceptions or perspectives of what creativity is or isn't. And my rekindled creative expression has enabled me to begin to explore my lived experience, my history, my story, my truth. It's enabled me to navigate and negotiate difficult and emotive memories and experiences. It's helped me to explore and express my emotions, even the difficult ones such as shame and anger and pain. It's given me the space to explore my thoughts, feelings and perspectives, and a platform to share fragments of myself and my experience through my creations, and to connect with others who get it. My creativity has helped me to appreciate that things that I create don't have to be perfect for someone to connect with them, to understand them and to want to purchase them. There are no rules to artistic expression. So yeah, you can write a poem in rhyming couplets, but poems don't have to rhyme. You can create order or chaos. There's no right or wrong, because it's how you engage your own individual, unique creativity and how you express yourself. So creative expression can bring a great sense of achievement. Everyone can create something and everyone can achieve and have a sense of pride in their work. Like my artwork, we can either confront or we can escape. We can explore the realms of both fantasy and reality, and we can travel to the future or to the past. We can reimagine our present. The only limits are our imagination and our willingness to unlock and set our creativity free. And through our shared creativity, we can shine a light on injustice and inequality. We can challenge and reclaim our narratives, and we can celebrate the fragments that make our identities hybridised and unique. Thank you. David Derbyshire. So, yeah.
We have another little clip from one of our care experienced Your Life, Your Story community.
I heard about it through a mutual friend who was also in the care system, someone who was at me a great deal in other areas, and I was invited along to this university in Lancaster, which was quite surprised because it was Cumbrian University. It was an opportunity for me to go away. I'd always wanted to go to university, but never got an opportunity when I was in care and left care. And so I went away, and it was great to meet people there. It was different for me going to a campus, meeting people. I was a bit nervous at first, but everyone just made me feel at ease. It was as if when we all met each other, that it was all just meant to be, really. So yeah, Your Life, Your Story was great. It was great there going to meet new people and to learn about myself. I already could write. I like writing poetry and things, but it gave me great opportunities and learned me to be more confident in my writing, as I met people there that could help me. There was people from all different areas, fiction and people who wrote poetry, character development, and even learned how to do a zine, which was really good because you didn't even have to write on it. And I really struggled with art, but it was quite interesting. So it helped me develop in other areas, and there was people there always to encourage me to do things. There was always someone alongside you could talk to, and I noticed the people in charge were always there encouraging other people if they were struggling in any way. Amanda was really good with people. I noticed how well she looked after everybody, and all the other people who were in leadership there who I become friendly with. The main thing that I took from the event really when I left was more confidence in myself and in the ability to write. I think that Your Life, Your Story is a really good thing, probably one of the best things I've been involved in to go away for, because it gives you those opportunities and connects you with people who are just there to help you progress in different areas. They will refer you on to different things. They've always kept in touch with me to see how I was going, encouraging each other. I've seen people build up relationships where they've gone on to develop their own ministries, should I say, how they can go out to people. Sarah Jane and Yusuf were great there. I met David, who wrote a book from experience. It was tremendous just to meet these people and just to learn, and I would really encourage anyone to go on it and support it. Yes, so that's probably all I'd like to say. I don't really know what to say because I'm not very good at doing videos, but I wanted to do this video because I wanted people to just support these people in what they do. They've been a great help to me, and I'm sure many others. And when I come across people, I always try to point them towards these people. If they've got any ability, these people will help them. And it was just great. Keep up the good work, everybody, and please keep supporting them.
What's next?
You.
Me.
Anthology.
Not forgotten.
No, anthology.
Right, okay. So I think I'm going to stay where I'm comfortable this time, because I'm feeling a bit more relaxed. Your Life, Your Story was registered with Companies House in January 2019. This allows us to trade services to fund our charitable work, but more importantly, to pay care experienced people to facilitate Your Life, Your Story events. This is a very important principle of Your Life, Your Story, which is a not-for-profit company managed by 5 unsalaried directors who are care experienced, the child of a care experienced parent, or a caregiver. 2019 was also the year that we attended the annual International TCTC conference in Windsor to deliver our lived experience workshop, Letters to the Little People. During the workshop, we unleashed the power of our collective voice. From a range of perspectives, we shared uncomfortable truths that had been kept silent and locked away, and shared lessons and deep insights that can only be garnered from having lived it. We shone a light upon injustice and provided participants with an opportunity to engage in what is often unseen and unheard. When the pandemic forced our unsuspecting world into lockdown just 4 months later, Your Life, Your Story 2020 was cancelled. We were disappointed, but not defeated. And instead of doing nothing, we decided to put our efforts into publishing the first Your Life, Your Story anthology, and to take Your Life, Your Story online later that year with a Christmas event, The Gift of Experience, The Truth Unwrapped. We didn't know then that that would be the last Your Life, Your Story event that Yusuf Paul McCormack, one of the 5 founding directors, would attend. On the 15th of January 2021, our community was devastated to learn that Yusuf Paul McCormack, director of Your Life, Your Story and co-director of Artifacts, had lost his life to COVID. A few weeks after his passing, in honour of his memory, we hosted a tribute event during World Social Work Week in the spirit of Ubuntu. I am because we are. Tributes poured in and personal memories of Yusuf were shared during the event. Director Tasmin Trevorrow unveiled the portrait she had painted in his honour and the spoken word piece she wrote to accompany it, A Colourful Life. Despite our deep loss, as you can see, Yusuf remains with us in our many memories of good times shared through the legacy of his work, some of which is here with us today, and through his wonderful daughter Kate, who has taken his place on the board. Over the past 5 years, Your Life, Your Story has become home to a hugely diverse community with a shared identity. We offer unique opportunities to explore the lived experience of care experienced people and caregivers. We connect people that might otherwise never meet, help them find their voice, and collectively disseminate real-world lived experience across generations. We make it possible to move beyond stereotypes in a safe space where participants can relate to one another in the present and access the benefits of authentic relationships while not flinching from the past. Your Life, Your Story is completely independent of the care sector. It is care leavers and care experienced people with an understanding of the history and the issues that are providing this space and bringing the community together. As our collective voice grows louder through mutually rewarding relationships reclaimed through the shared narrative of lived experience, so does our determination to be the difference in the lives of vulnerable children and the adults they become. Thank you.
So now we're going to read a couple of pieces from the anthology. And I'm going to start with my piece. So what I found as a child growing up in a chaotic and abusive environment and as a young person growing up in care is that with most people, my words weren't valued, my words didn't matter, not as I thought they should do. So I stopped saying it, I stopped asking questions, I stopped sharing my thoughts and feelings, and I stopped caring about what people around me were trying to do because I thought they were all going to be the same anyway. They didn't have time for me, so therefore they didn't care. And I've written this verse from a child's perspective, as what I'd like you to remember is they're not the words of the adult you see sitting here today, but of the child that I was and the child that I still carry inside. And this verse was written with my social workers in mind, but also reflecting upon the wider network of professionals that were involved in my life: teachers, carers, key workers, support workers, counsellors, police officers, health professionals, even other everyday adults that were in my orbit. And so the poem's called Hey Miss. Hey Miss, will you ever notice what's going on? Because you come to our house, you're here 5 minutes and then you're gone. You never ask us about our rooms, about our beds or that big bruise. It's all well and good giving smiles, admiring our new toys, but you never asked us any questions before you were straight back out the door. You never asked me if I'm happy or what were my favourite things or what made me scared of the night time. You never asked none of them things. Hey miss, will you tell me what's on them papers you carry? Because I think they're about us, but you're always in and out in a hurry, so I can't ask you what there was. I need you to say what you mean and mean what you say, because if you don't, I get thoughts in my head and I can't make them go away. If I did ask you a question, would you answer? Because I can tell when people really don't want to say stuff. How am I supposed to trust you to tell you my stuff if you won't even stay long enough for me to properly know your name? Hey miss, will you tell me what's going on? I'm scared of all the big people and it feels like I've done something wrong. I need you to let me know things, even if it won't be okay. I need you to explain the meetings and lots of the things that you say. I need you to hear my side, don't try and shut me up. I have lots of things to tell you, and it usually starts with the safe, silly stuff. So will you give me the time to get around to opening up? Hey miss, will you not talk about me like I'm not there? If you bring me into the conversation, then it's more likely that I'll share. I might tell you about the things that are bothering me, my thoughts about my future and where I'd like to be. I might tell you about the things that have played on my mind, made me grumpy and angry, feel awful inside. My thoughts and feelings are precious. I don't want them to be dismissed. And if I feel they are, then I might just call it quits and not try and tell you anything ever again. And would you remember anyway? Hey miss, will you remember that I really hate peas? That my best friend is my dog Bandit and that my sister is Emma Louise? Will you remember that I dropped some clues while we were chatting? That I left you some breadcrumbs to follow because I couldn't speak about it? Will you remember that tomorrow? Will you remember the things that are special to me? The things that make me scream? Will you remember things that make me cross so you can help me blow off steam in a safe way? Will you remember all of those things because it shows me that you care? And maybe I can start to trust you a little bit, to maybe start to share. I might tell you my hopes, goals and dreams because I do have all of those things. If only you'll be there, be present and try to tune in. Will you ask, notice, listen and remember the little bits? Because it's all of them things that help me put back together the blocks to make positive relationships. Hey miss, will you show me that you kind of understand? Will you appreciate my emotions? Will you try to comprehend where it is that I'm coming from? Because I need you to know that despite all of this stuff, I'm worth a chance. I'm worth a go. Thank you.
So we have a narrated poem for you from Tasmin, who couldn't be with us today. So, but I think it's a very important poem that you hear.
Like a refugee in his own land, a land that has forgotten him, the care child wanders with no hand to hold when it is cold, or to stop the blows from an unseen foe that strikes in the night when curled he lays on a cardboard box, a box wet and stained with rain and tears, in a lonely town on an unnamed street, forgotten. No longer remembered by the state, his corporate parent, who arrived too late to save him. To save him from the monsters in his head, the monsters who used to join him in his soiled single bed when he was young. Oh, so young. Too old now, they celebrate. They consign him off their books with an almost clean slate, Hooray! A big fat tick in the corporate box. Ofsted regulated? What a load of... Who regulates Ofsted anyway, he says. Irony. He is now 21, the job is done. He slips into anonymity, a nameless face in a human sea. Not so many friends, definitely no family. The monsters return, no longer under his quilt, but still embedded in his train-wrecked head. They would not give therapy when he was 3. Too young, they said. Would not give it when he was 5, 8 or 10. Onto the tablets, they said was best for him then. The tablets that numbed the pain and gave them the excuse to release a sigh and say, cured. Cured? No, repressed. Repressed by chains of numb and dead, but numb and dead he stayed, until the bells of age 21 rang their toll and sealed his fate. Out you go, they say. There's your flat and a ton or two to see you on your merry way. The way to homelessness, that is, because he was not equipped to make the perilous journey into adulthood. He forgot his pills and the walls caved in. As the monsters were not gone, they were still caged within. The chaos unleashed on him like bike chain whips on a baby's skin. Where can he go? Where can he begin? So instead he curls, holding a syringe as his hot water bottle on his cardboard box, a box wet with rain and tears in a lonely town on an unnamed street, forgotten.
It's quite powerful. So this is the last poem that we're going to read before we go and get another cup of tea. It's called Not Forgotten. Oh my God, I finally tracked you down. Your timely words seem meant to be, but you could not have known how much they'd mean to me. It's 40 years since we last met in that awful place, where cruelty went unpunished and justice was disgraced. There were fireworks in the attic with confiscated toys. Colouring books were all you had, designed to mute your noise. A cold bath if you wet the bed, stood barefoot in the snow. Deliveries hijacked, food packed to go. When visitors came, the scene was set to create illusion. Bay-windowed lounge unlocked just for the occasion. Well-practiced children on parade reciting party pieces with tea and cake to celebrate this perilous delusion. Years later, it came as no surprise the boy who blew the whistle was stripped and beaten by police, moved and branded liar. For I am left with no doubt abuse will be denied as long as truth is worthless and vested interest amplified. Thank you. Thank you. Shall we go and get a cup of tea?
10 past-ish.
What time are we coming back?
About 10 past.
About 10 past, guys?
For the best bit, obviously.
For the best bit. Obviously the best bit. Mr. Jackson until
20 minutes.
until past, so 15 minutes, yeah?
May have tap on something when I've been on too long.
Yeah. Shall I
On
do
your
that?
head.
Okay?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Okay, so for about 20 minutes or so, I'm really going to sort of tell you a little bit about the book and how it kind of came about and everything, and a little bit about the contents and things, and then later on when we kind of wrap up, I think we've got a bit of a session at the end where we're going to go out there and you can buy the book if you haven't already bought it, or you can smell at the book and say, I'm not buying that shit, you know, whatever you want to do. But we can have a bit of a kind of Q&A while we're out there. If you've got any questions or whatever you want to kind of dive a little bit deeper into some of the stuff, that's fine. We can have a chat out there over coffee. So the book in itself was a bit of a strange endeavour for me, really, because by the time I sort of got round to writing it, I'd been to the Your Life, Your Story event, and I'd always had it in my mind that I would probably do it anyway, but I was really more interested in just documenting it, because I kind of had this idea in my head that, well, you know, there's no justice to be had because some of these people are dead and people just don't care anymore, and you've got that age-old problem of trying to demonstrate or prove things that happened 30, 40 years ago, even longer actually, I don't like to admit that, but so I kind of just got to the idea of I would document it anyway. And I guess it's probably more about the way my mind works, is it just kind of came out in this story, you know, I just kind of bombed the page with my computer, and I kind of used to sit there and I'd wake up at 2 in the morning with an idea in my head, so I'd jump out of bed and I'd spend half an hour just getting the general gist of it down, and then the next day I would kind of go back and read it, and it looked like nonsense because obviously I'd written it at 2 in the morning, so I'd amend it and all the rest of it. And I didn't write it from start to finish, I sort of dived in here and did a bit there and got an idea about that, and then went round here. And it all kind of came together basically, you know, it's not so much a story of, although it does go chronologically now, it's really a series of discrete stories within the book. So although it does start in the book from birth and kind of works up to 16, 17 or whatever, when it was written it was more discrete stories that then kind of woven together and provided that kind of understanding, that narrative across the continuum of time, so to speak. So that's how it really came about. It took me about 3 months, I think, to do it all, because I'm a little bit one of those people who, some of you may identify with this, being students with essays to do and things like that, where you leave it all to the last minute and then you just get in there and you just, you know, it's like Pro Plus, it's your, you know, thing that gives you wings and Red Bull and all this sort of stuff. And so that's the kind of attitude I took, you know, I was like going into work and doing my thing, and I had all these ideas, and I used to send myself emails, so I'd be in work and the idea would come, so I'd send myself an email and then I'd pick that up when I got home and start writing it. So I took all told, it took about 3 months. And then it was more like a realisation that it was sort of a book, really. It never written with the intent of being a book, it just sort of ended up as a book, you know. It's like bolting bits of metal together and everything, and then all of a sudden, oh, I've got a car. You know, it doesn't happen like that, but that's the basic principle of it. And so that was how that came about. And like I say, it's really a series of stories, basically, about things that happened, about people that I interacted with, that I came to know. Some of those people aren't with us anymore, you know, some people fared much worse in life, some people did better, but it's just really a narrative about that. And some of the stories in there are kind of quite traumatising, really. So I did kind of, when I was writing the book, I had to occasionally put it down myself, even though at the time of writing I had reconciled. None of these issues really troubled me as such in life, but when you sit down and you start to write them all at the same time, you have these little moments where, you know, the kebab shop's shut and all you've got is your Red Bull, and you kind of have a little bit of a sweat on or whatever, and then you kind of have to leave it for a day and that sort of thing. And I think for me, it was more, not so much about the incidents that occurred, because I've kind of long since reconciled some of that stuff in my mind anyway, and it kind of doesn't really trouble me. I think it was more the outrage of what had happened, and it was the outrage that these people had damaged so many lives with what they did and what they got away with, and that, I think the fact that they got away with it was what outraged me as well as what they did. And so that's, in a way, is kind of like the impetus a little bit for doing some of this stuff here as well, you know, is to try and, not, I think educate's the wrong word, because it sounds like preaching to you or telling you what to do, but it's really just like raising awareness, you know, and the key thing, which I think most of us will probably agree on, is that awareness for you, because what you do today, it's what's described as a latent impact. You don't see the damage that you're going to do today. Yeah, it manifests itself and it becomes somebody else's problem in 10 years or 15 years or 20 years. Or it manifests itself with a 35-year-old bloke stood on a bridge waiting to jump into a river, yeah, full of beer, full of whiskey or whatever. And so raising awareness of these issues, it's really designed to maybe kind of get to the point where, you know, one of the objectives of the book is hopefully to get to the point where you read that book and you understand some of the things that have gone on historically, you understand how some of those things are still going on, you understand what your role is in a child's life, and that ultimately you can potentially make better decisions that result in potentially that guy in 30 years isn't stood on the bridge waiting to jump. Because that is really the impact that you can have, you know, and I've discussed with a couple of you in the breaks, you know, you really have to grasp, you can't get it from a textbook. You have to grasp this concept that what you do, what you say, what you write will impact somebody, and they will remember for the rest of your life. Some of you have looked at this jacket. You have to understand the impact somebody had on a child for a man to remember all of that 40 years later, 40 plus years later. And look at how many labels are on there. Look at those labels. That's one man's experience of the childcare system in the 60s and 70s, you know. And yet 40 years later, you can sit down with a pen and start to write. Must be put a couple of hundred labels on there. And so yeah, and so the book, you know, lots of stories in there. You know, there's stories in there about what is in effect the rape of children. You know, back in the day, nobody will probably want to admit it, but it was a paedophile's dream, yeah, to work in that system, because you've got children at your mercy. You were there to look after them, yeah. Social workers working single staffing shifts over weekends with access to girls, access to boys. A brutal regime in place that allowed for the physical abuse and the sexual abuse of children, and nobody cared. Yeah, literally nobody cared. Okay, and this is the sort of stuff that went on, and that sort of stuff is in the book. You know, there's incidents in the book there of people who have self-harmed because of the treatment that they received during the course of their care. Use the term lightly. You know, Sarah touched on it before when we talk about language and how there was a little bit of a rebellion about the term care leaver. We didn't leave anything, we were kicked out. We got to 16 and it's there's a bedsit, off you go. And nobody cared. You had to survive, you know, and things like that I found personally didn't really affect me at the time as much as perhaps they should have done. But when they did affect me, and some of the things historically that were done, and some of the things that I've had to do to survive as a child, they really started to impact when I had my own son. So you're holding your own baby at 4, 5, 6 months old. And for those of you who maybe have children, it must be hard for you to put yourself in a mindset that would allow you to drop that baby into a bath of scalding water, and then to take that baby out of the hot water and put them in a cupboard, close the door and leave them. This is one of the things that I had to come to terms with. It was very hard for me to hold my son and imagine those things happening. And then you get the impact of that, you see, you start to understand what happened to you. It was very difficult to understand some of the beatings and some of the violence and everything, and to realise that there's my son at 5 or 6, and to be able to trace your own history back to 5 or 6, and to understand, wow, that happened then, and that happened, and that happened. I was 5, 6, 7 years old, and so those sorts of things are in the book. You know, I think I was 11 or 12 years old when I ran away from a home in Bolton, just up the road. I think that was where we first met, wasn't it? It was, yeah. Yeah, I think there's a children's home in Bolton. And as I said before, I tell you this story, Amanda was one of the good ones, okay. We're like fellow whistleblowers, is that real? Whistleblowers.
Well said.
Real
Pay
well
later.
But I ran away from there, and I got from Bolton to Calais in France. It was quite an achievement, I thought, you know, resilience and all that sort of stuff. I'm well hard, you know. Kind of got the way to France there, and it was a troublesome time because I kind of wandered around Calais wondering what the hell was a baguette, you know, things like this, because the nearest we got to French was a lady called Miss Nathan, who was a French teacher at school, who didn't look French, and, you know, there was nothing French about, she just taught the subject. But here I was in the land of baguettes and cheese and snails and things like this. And I kind of wandered around for a couple of days and slept in a few shop doorways and everything. But it was better than what I'd come from, because I was safe. Yeah, I was safe. Nobody could hit me, nobody could beat me up, nobody could starve me. I was safe. I was sleeping in shop doorways and I was safe. I had a sandwich in my stomach. Sometimes I didn't have that here. Yeah, I didn't have to witness some of the stuff that I was witnessing at that time. And so it sounds rather ironic that when I get to a son who's 11 years old and I look at him and I think to myself, oh my God, if I suddenly got a telephone call saying, by the way, your boy's in Calais eating baguettes and he isn't on a school trip, the shit's hitting the fan. You know, it's not going to be pretty, you know, it's hitting the fan. But that was the reality of it, you know, and again, that's in the book. You can read about that experience, and it caused problems as well. It caused problems when I came back. I don't know if any of you know of a police series called The Sweeney, which was quite a big thing in the 70s, I think, wasn't it, in the early 80s. John Ford was in it, and it was about the flying squad in London, and it was all kind of violent for the day in the Times. It's kind of quite cheesy now, but it was probably realistic at the time. But when I came back and got into Dover off the hovercraft as it was then, it was like a Sweeney operation. The police came out of nowhere, and I was just casually strolling through the terminal, and they all jumped on me. And then they took me to this home in Kent, and I never wanted to leave. It was great, because they all had their own bedrooms, they were getting 3 meals a day, they all had clean clothes on and everything, and the staff looked like they actually cared, you know, and they had a snooker table. And they had books. I've never had a book of my own. Yeah, I've never ever had a book of my own at 11, 12 years old. Yeah, I've never had possessions that I could call. I never even had clothes that I could call my own. Back in those days, wasn't it? It was like a big communal cupboard. First up, best dressed. Simple as that. First one to the table, best fed. Get there late, no food left. Hey, get up earlier, you know? And that's how it was. And yet these people were there and they were like, oh, come and sit down, breakfast, go and help yourself, you know, and get some clothes while you're at it, because you're not allowed to eat at the table naked, you know, and all this sort of thing going on, and it was great, you know, and I was like, I want to stay here. And then I got this like message, oh, your social worker's on the way down. I was like, you're joking, just leave me here, what are you taking me back for? And, you know, again, it's in the book, and it's a bit of a story, but it kind of goes on, you know, if you read the book, you've got to kind of read it from the mindset of a child in a way, because you've got to try and understand the the implications of these things happening. And these are widespread. You know, this is not just me seeing this. Yusuf saw it, Sarah saw it, Taz saw it. Many, many children. There's over 500,000 care experienced people in the UK at the moment. Okay, 500,000. Yeah, and many from a certain generation witnessed this. They went through this. They'll tell you the same stories. Yeah, and so it's important that historically you have that understanding of what went on, how that impacts behaviour, you know, because people kind of look at me and I've had it said to me, oh, you know, you've done all right, you've been successful and all this and that, but that's not a justification for all the damage that you've done because somebody you know turned out all right. You know, we wouldn't say that to women, say, yeah, there's sexism, but Angela Merkel's done okay. Oh, that's all right, that justifies all the sexism then. It doesn't, does it? You know, it doesn't justify the glass ceiling, it doesn't justify the fact that women don't feel safe going out on their own. Yeah, that they can't stand in a pub without some bloke trying to chat them up or being inappropriate in their behaviour or anything else. And so, seeing successful people from a care experience, it doesn't justify what went on. Ramsey says, Chancellor, is it Manchester or here or whatever, he's one of the people. The guy's successful. It doesn't justify what went on. You can't use that as an excuse. And you guys have an opportunity, you know, to make that difference, to be the difference, as we have a little hashtag going on our Twitter feeds, don't we?
Yeah, we do.
You know, be the difference. And it is a really important message because when you read the book and you understand that in my childhood, yeah, and most of my life really, nobody has ever really been the difference. There's been very few people who I would look up to and think, wish I was like that person. Because I've had to do things myself, so I wish I was like me. You know, but you have the chance to be the difference to some child, and that's what you can get out of that book, is to understand what not being the difference looks like. It tells you what you need to do in order to be the difference. And so it's kind of important in a way. And yeah, you know, there's a lot of stories in the book. You're more than welcome to get in touch with us through the website or whatever. We're on Twitter. I can give you my Twitter handle, as I believe the expression is. Okay, you can get my Twitter handle and we can, what's that? You can hit me up, baby. Okay, so we can have a chat, you know, if there's things that you want to know, if there's things that you think can help and a dialogue will help, that's fine. We can do a Zoom, we can have a chat or whatever, you know. But like I say, you've got the anthology, you've got the book. There's a lot of experience in those two publications alone, and the difference between that and a textbook is it's actual kind of factual stuff. You know, it's the stuff that we can't actually teach you by giving you a book and saying, come back, we'll have a lecture in a week or whatever, yeah. So, important stuff, and if you can, have a read and get in touch with Ruth, and she'll get in touch with us, or get on Twitter or whatever, and we'll try to help as much as we can. All right.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are getting to the end of our time with you. We have got a few minutes. We can take a few questions if you've got any. And then we're going into our final recorded message and our final poem from Sarah. So, anybody, 5 minutes? Anybody want to comment? We are running the next Your Life, Your Story event in October. We are actively seeking grants and filling in application forms for that. And so thank you to those of you who purchased the books, because all that goes into the fund towards Your Life, Your Story 2022. So we're grateful for that. Thank you. And if you've no questions, we'll go into the final recorded piece.
there's going to be somebody who asks a question right at the end when everybody wants to go home. Because there always is that one person. Yeah.
My memories and experience of Your Life, Your Story are nothing but fantastic. I went and didn't really know what to expect, but was met with the most welcoming group of people, where I felt that at no point did I ever have to justify myself or tell what happened to me. I was accepted in a safe space where I was able to express myself with like-minded people. And I have to say it's the first time I've come together in a community like that, whereby I was able to express myself freely through various forms of art and medium in order to try to, in some way, express what had happened to me. And it was a fantastic experience. It was a great few days with some wonderful people who I've built some great relationships with, and I think some lifetime friendships. And I think the benefit of bringing people together who are care experienced and caregivers shows that not all experiences are negative, and that there are some wonderfully kind and empathetic people out there that do understand what it's like to go through trauma as a childhood and can create those safer spaces so that we can move forward and learn together and grow and into the people that we deserve to be, which is expressive, emotionally positive people that contribute to a wonderful community. And if it wasn't for Your Life, Your Story, I don't think I would have ever realised that there's a wider community out there that can help each other in such a selfless way. So thank you, Your Life, Your Story, and everything you do, and I can't recommend them highly enough to anybody else out there. Give it a go and reach out and get in touch.
So this poem I wrote after my first experience of Your Life, Your Story. And the first time I went to Your Life, Your Story at the showcase event, I did have to have a chair to hold me up. Amanda's got a video of me. I look like a complete blancmange. But when I got home, I kind of reflected on the weekend, and I'm not really someone who goes and puts myself in spaces with people I don't know. I'm one of the most antisocial social workers you'll probably ever meet. I do like to stay in my own house. I'm a bit of a hobbit. So it was challenging for me to take myself away for them few days, be around other people, be in a different environment, and potentially after, think about, not discuss, but think about some of the most difficult and challenging things that had happened to me in my past. So I wrote this poem, and it's called Different and One. We are different, but we are one. We came from different places, different people, different faces, from the roots of different beginnings, different trees. We've walked on different paths, trod different trails. We've all had different things that have brought us to our knees, but we had dreams. We've all known the inner workings of life's struggles. We've jumped hurdles and climbed mountains abound. We've pulled ourselves up from our bootstraps when kindness, love and safety were nowhere to be found. It's in this darkness we embraced ourselves. We have known loneliness and rejection. We have known hatred, abuse and disaffection. We have known heartless processes and being denied affection, despite us all growing from different directions, but we got through. We have known lost identities and missing parts, about records with redactions, about judgments from the start. We have known abandonment, fear and isolation, but you blame us, our ways, our behaviour. This is your mitigation. We have known the dark alleyways of exploitation, vice and corruption. We have journeyed down paths of complete self-destruction. We have known that you need to toe the line, remain silent, compliant, becoming frozen, trapped in time. But our voice is still there, screaming silently from inside. We have known the pain of speaking out, of uttering a sound and then taking a clout, of saying too much and then wishing you hadn't even opened your mouth. of being caught with a sideways glance, or when those bubbling words spilled out faster than you had the chance to anticipate the consequences. We have known heartbreak and how to keep our eyes to the floor, to avert our gaze from anything human, because we're not people anymore, or so they thought. We have known separation, not just from others, but ourselves, compartmentalised in boxes that we're too afraid to open out. We have known that spark that keeps us going, the ember deep inside us that's barely glowing, waiting to be fanned into a flame. We are the people who have known the cold, not only on our flesh, but in our hearts. We have known opinions and aspirations. We've strived for second chances, new beginnings and fresh starts. We've hidden in the shadows, been scared stiff of them too. We've run, we've fought, we've battled, and we've kept on breaking through. We have eyes that have seen things they never should have seen. We have known hands in places they never should have been. Words spoken in our ears, now etched into our brains. The touch of our oppressors, our abusers, it runs within our veins. We have known the insidious, the callous, cruel and wicked. We have witnessed the deranged, cold-hearted and simply twisted. But somehow we were to blame. Now we're the powerful ones, we know our minds. No one can edit out our futures, chop bits out, reduce or minimise. Our history will always be a reminder. It's our past, but our strength, our passions, our determination will be what defines our journeys now. We've known the truths unspoken, the stories behind our smiles, within our eyes. We know that once we were lost, fragmented and broken, but together, different and one, we shall rise.
So that's everything we've got to share with you. Thank you, Ruth, for your hospitality over the day and your support. And thank you, Salford University, the technicians, for giving us such a wonderful opportunity to amplify our collective voice. So thank you, much appreciated.
I mean, I'd love to say thank you to you as well on behalf of the university. I mean, it's just been an amazing afternoon. I've just sat there and listened and heard, you know, your stories have been heard and they've had impact, and, you know, we now go away holding those stories and knowing that we have to do things so that this kind of abuse doesn't carry on. You know, it's got to be challenged. And, you know, a lot of you are trainee social workers. You've heard the story. You've got a responsibility to you know, challenge bad practice, to challenge abuse, to make sure that things are better. We have to do that, don't we?
We do. And sometimes it's, you know, we have to question the system.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and you know, feed back to those, you know, the policy makers and the politicians when the system is in need of repair.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
And we really hope that you can come again and maybe come into some of the teaching sessions to, you know, we've got a handful of people here, we've got people online that have been listening as well. It'd be good if we could reach more people, wouldn't it?
It would be
So
very good.
if you could come back again, that would be amazing, really. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
It's been amazing.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us. Thank you, David. Thank you, Sarah Jane.
Thank you guys, it's been
Wouldn't be your
been a
life,
pleasure.
your story without you.